He who has ears to hear, let him hear. You're the pastor of this church because God has raised you up to be the pastor. You're the worship leader because God's put you there. It's so important that the people can hear what God's put in your heart. It's not about an ego. It's about making your building, it's just facilitating and equipping it so they can hear the message and receive the word of faith and act upon it. I don't want to over-spiritualize it, but I can't stress enough the importance of addressing this issue in your churches.
Mm-hmm. The reality is that, that the equipment is only a small part of it. The acoustics in your room are crucial. I used to live in San Francisco, and a number of years ago, they built Davies Hall, which was where the San Francisco Symphony played. Mm-hmm. And they spent, I forget, it was like $40 million building this building in the 70s. And they got it, and they hired the best acousticians and the best PA people and all of that stuff to get it done right. And they built it, and they put the symphony in there, and they started playing, and it sounded terrible.
Oh my gosh!
And they missed the boat on the acoustics in there, and so that's so important for a symphony because they're not relying so much on the PA as they are on the room itself. So they spent $11 million redoing it. So if you've built a church and you're kind of married to the design that you had in your church, be willing to rethink. It's like writing a song. You have to, you might have written a great song, but you have to be willing to rethink and tweak and change. And so, I was in a church once consulting a little bit, and the pastor said, "Well, no, the acoustics are awesome in our church." He said, this church was designed like a Shakespearean playhouse, so you can stand on the stage and talk and without a PA and it'll sound great. And I said, well, that's awesome. You ought to be doing Shakespeare then, because yes, the problem is you've put a band in here with drums and electric guitars, and you can't understand a word that's coming out of anybody's mouth, and it's just noise in the room because it's too live. So you need to tone down the room with some acoustics. So I'm not an acoustician, but the reality is you want to, sound is physics, and sound travels through the air. It's waveforms, and it travels through the air. It bounces off of walls, and it reflects, and it goes around the room, and depending on how the room is shaped, what the walls are made out of, the ceiling, the floors, all of that stuff affects how sound interacts with the room. So what you want to do is you want to treat the room with some acoustic treatment, being either absorbers so that sound won't bounce, it'll hit it and stay there, or diffusers so when it does hit it, it diffuses off in a better pattern so that it's not creating feedback and weird modal things in the room where the frequencies are aligning with each other and all that kind of weird stuff. So
is there is that an expensive proposition to treat your church acoustically? Is it as expensive as putting in the proper PA system?
Right. Actually, you want to be careful because you can't choose one over the other. Your acoustics is just as important as your PA. If you haven't treated your acoustics well, you're not necessarily going to overcome all those problems with just PA. So yes, it can be expensive to do acoustic treatment in your church, but it's really necessary. If you have handy guys in your church, there are a number of websites where you can go to some do-it-yourself kind of websites where you can build different absorbers and things like that. But that's a lot of work, but it's worth it.
It's a real fine line with acoustics in your building, because I've been in a lot of churches that they've been in a small church, a small setting, and then they build their brand new facility and they treat it acoustically. It's so dead that they move into this facility and it's like people aren't worshiping anymore.
Yeah.
It's a fine line that you walk, I think, in this, because there's something wonderful about hearing people sing. When was the last time in your church that the musicians stopped and the people lifted their voices and sang? you get 1,000 people just singing. It's a beautiful sound, and we've forgotten about it because we've got, we're at rock, and we got acoustically treated stages. The drums can play loud, but the people sing, and their voice goes about this high above. So what happens is, because it's so acoustically treated and so dead, people think, why should I sing? I'm at a show. I'm going to watch the show. So there's a fine line, because there's something wonderful about having some sense of your voice is going somewhere. That's why acoustics are so important in designing the church. And it's better to do this when you're designing your church than trying to retrofit it. Same with the PA system. I'm thinking about the church we were in. I won't mention any names, but they had built onto the church. They had a PA system that was adequate for 200 people. When the church grew to 400, they added a couple speakers, and the church grew to 800 and to 1,500. They kept adding on to the system, but it didn't get
it was a Frankenstein system. Yeah. It was.
Chuck called it the Frankenstein system, but it was every room, every little place had a different